Alfa Romeo has always done things differently, and their Brera coupe is perfect proof. On paper, there are rivals that make more sense. On your driveway, it's far more difficult to resist. Motor show concept cars rarely make it to production reality, and those that do tend to get watered down. Here's an exception. Alfa Romeo's Brera wowed the crowds at the 2002 Geneva Motor Show as a design study. Yet 4 years later, with the exception of the show model's futuristic gull-wing doors, pretty much the same thing was on sale at UK Alfa Romeo dealerships to replace the old GTV coupe. The Brera is named after a grand and artistic suburb of Milan, and though it was designed by Giugiaro, it was actually production engineered by rival design house Pininfarina, who build the car at their Turin factory. Now, though you wouldn't necessarily guess it at first glance, this model shares 55% of its parts with Alfa Romeo's 159 saloon, and the two cars are pretty much identical from nose to dashboard, though the Brera's shorter wheelbase should in theory make it the more agile car. Now start the car up and you'd know what you were sitting in with a blindfold on, as long as you've opted for one of the petrol models. There's that glorious Alfa rasp, especially in the 3.2 litre V6 version that I'm driving here, that comes with the option of Alfa's Q4 all-wheel drive system. 260 brake horsepower, otherwise being quite a lot to put through the front wheels. Many Brera customers, however, opt for the 185 brake horsepower 2.2 litre petrol version, unless tax considerations force them to consider the 200 brake horsepower 2.4 litre diesel. Possibly a better choice than both, however, is the 4-cylinder 200 brake horsepower 1750 TBI petrol model, offering V6 performance, 0 to 60 mile an hour in 7.7 seconds on the way to 146 mile an hour, with small engine economy. Depending on the version you choose, there's a choice between 6-speed manual or semi-automatic Q-tronic gearboxes. At the wheel, those familiar with Alfa's 159 saloon will recognise the dashboard and dials, but find themselves sitting a bit lower. Now, being a coupe, of course, with a rising waistline and those thick rear pillars, it's not as easy to see out of. Still, despite the quite heavy curb weight, it's 1,605 kilograms in this V6 version, it goes pretty well. The entry-level 4-cylinder model, even that version gets to 60 from rest in 8.6 seconds on the way to a top speed of 139 miles an hour. That's half a second slower to 60 than the diesel, and a second and a half slower to 60 than this V6 model, which howls its way gloriously to 155 miles an hour. Now, as far as the rest is concerned, well, it really depends on what you're expecting. Ultimately, this isn't a car that really enjoys being taken by the scruff of the neck and thrown about, although it'll happily set about a twisting B road if that's what's on the agenda, and the response tends to be better the faster you go. Now, the slight understeer and mild body lean that you get in the standard versions have been decently dialed out on this more focused S model that I'm driving here, which is much better resolved, although the VDC stability control and ASR traction control systems still are rather over keen to cut in should you get a bit too enthusiastic. Depending on who you speak to, the Brera is variously seen as either unspeakably beautiful or very slightly awkward. There are no in-betweens. All I can say is that it's a shape that's really grown on me, and one that looks immeasurably better in the metal, the triple light units lurking furtively beneath the brow of the bonnet. As you move towards the rear, past the frameless doors, there's a rising waistline that sweeps around the tail before pitching downwards into an Alfa Romeo badge that doubles as a hatch release catch. Below this sits 4 gorgeous quadruple exhaust pipes. Now, I'd love to have seen this car with the show model's gull-wing doors, but at least the concept vehicle's full-length glass roof made it to production reality. With its 3-part overlapping electric blind, giving an airy feel to the interior that's missing from this particular version that doesn't have it. Inside, there's a higher standard of fit and finish than you'll find on many rivals, and the almost obligatory Alfa sense of occasion. There's nice metallic finishes here, driver-orientated instruments, and more than a nod to tradition. How many cars, for example, these days have an oil temperature gauge? The Alfa does, and it's a welcome touch. There's a voguish starter button, and also plenty of adjustment, both on the seat and on the wheel, so that even taller owners should find it possible to get a really comfortable driving position. Now, as with most coupes, backseat knee room is almost non-existent. I've got the front seat pushed forward as far as it will go, and the headroom isn't that great either. So these chairs are best left either for kids on short journeys, or perhaps more sensibly folded forward, thereby increasing luggage room from 300 to 610 litres.
The Brera isn't cheap, priced as it is in the £25,000 to £34,000 bracket. For that money, you could buy a rival BMW 3 Series Coupe or a Nissan 370Z.
But you'd be buying a Japanese sports car, not an Alfa Romeo. If you can't see the difference, then you won't see the point of this car. Now, you can see why the entry-level 2.2 litre petrol 4-cylinder version is the big seller. Its junior exotic looks and charismatic engine giving it some real personality. Though on paper the JTD diesel version makes more sense, it just doesn't sound the same, and sound is a big part of the Alfa Romeo ownership experience. If I could afford it, I'd go for the 3.2 litre V6 petrol version that I'm testing here every time. This engine sums up everything an Alfa Romeo should be about. If you're after a convertible version, well, Alfa Romeo Spider is effectively that. As for equipment, well, various designs of gorgeous alloy wheel, a trip computer, climate control, a decent quality Bose stereo system, cruise control, electric almost everything, and leather trim on most models. It's all pretty much standard. There's also this ski hatch in the middle of the split folding rear seat so that you can poke long items between the seats. The 2.2 litre petrol model returns a reasonable 30 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, and a not too bad 218 grams per kilometre of CO2. If costs are key though, you'll need to know that the diesel variant manages 41.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and just 179 grams per kilometre of CO2.
The 1750 TBI petrol version returns a good compromise, 189 grams per kilometre and 34.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle.
Drive the V6 petrol model as I'm doing here and you'll be lucky to see around 25 miles to the gallon on a regular basis. Emissions vary between 260 and 270 grams per kilometre. Insurance groupings across the range go between 15 and 18. Residual values, well, they're pretty comparable with BMW and Audi, plus of course the Alfa Romeo will be better specified. This Alfa Romeo is certainly an interesting car. A head-turner, a controversy, a missed opportunity, the last of a line, a work of automotive art. The Brera is anything but boring. Now, a coupe can be many things, but the only inexcusable quality for one is dullness. The Brera, judged on that criteria, has to be a success. Now, a rather hefty price tag and some very talented rivals may act as significant impediments, but this model has a charisma that may well steamroll such trifling caveats. Factor in reasonably competitive running costs and a sense of occasion that escapes its German rivals, and you've got a car that's certainly intriguing and deserving of serious consideration. Now, much will depend on whether you love the looks and can live without class-leading handling. If that sounds like you, the Brera comes with a big recommendation.